I wanted to do some contemporary stuff. I thought I'm never allowed to do anything where people wear recognizable trousers, and I'm getting typecast, so I tried to do more interesting things. One of the ones that was destroyed, The Out of the Unknown, won a little prize at the International Science Fiction Exhibition, and I've still got the certificate of the prize, but no film. It's rather sad. It's a question of design with you and the designer imagining a world, and sometimes the script doesn't give you any idea of what the world is like, and you have to decide. And Tony Abbott and I got on very well, and we made this extraordinary spaceship, and I've still got some stills from it. It really looked rather good. Nobody ever asked me whether I wanted the tape kept, which is rather sad. And in fact, with some of the shows, it's extremely sad. There was, I regret, I think, more than anything, those first things I ever shot. That first film I shot on Exmoor, that has disappeared forever. It was shot on 35mm film, black and white. It looked rather good. It went onto tape and disappeared forever. It was quite a big film organisation, BBC West. I bet it's there somewhere. I bet someone could dig it out. Anything that happened in front of the camera was my responsibility. And a director's got to be able to do several things. He's got to be able to write some simple lines of dialogue. He's got to be able to act a little bit if he has to. He's got to understand actors and how to work with them. He's got roughly to know a bit about photography, though if he thinks he knows as much as a cameraman about photography, he's a fool. Likewise with sound. But you've got to be able to talk to them in their own terms, and so arrive at something exciting together. What we used to do, we used to rehearse outside for days, and so the actors got to a stage of tremendous competence and knowledge and knowing what it was about, and they were helping the cameraman out by saying, "Would you like me to do that again? I'll do it exactly the same." And the cameramen were working like dogs. When you think that we used to shoot 3/4 of an hour in 2 days, as a matter of course, and make it look really quite professional, there were strange days. Sound and vision were together, but the recording was done in a little room somewhere. And you needed the okay from the tape editor after each sequence, see whether it was all right or not. And sometimes you were like that and wondering, but it nearly always was all right. You'd usually have 3 machines at least, and so you could watch both images at the same time. And there are a lot of very skilled tape editors there who were rather despised by film editors who thought they knew more about it. But there are a lot of very good people who did extraordinary work. And I remember I used to like to play in what one had to do to transfer from shot to shot is juggle the reel and get in the right place and press the button. I used to love doing that. Once we finished, I always thought that later on, when I thought about it, I always thought that this would last forever. But the outtakes, I didn't think I wanted to keep. I was probably unwise because there would be all sorts of interesting stuff one could have found. The big difference happened when colour arrived. I was responsible for the second colour show I think ever recorded, which was Portrait of a Lady, a Henry James novel, which actually went down really quite well. And I remember an incident, we had a clash between the colour used on a set and the colour used on a costume. And I said, what are we going to do? It doesn't work. One of them's got to go. And I don't think we can put on another costume. And the designer said, okay, I'll repaint the set. And did so in half an hour. I said, the most interesting colours you get, colour you get has got to be the flesh colour, the faces. And so I used a lot of greens and a lot of and very, very, very little red ever. And what was always interesting was to try and make the blacks and dark blues, get the variation between them, and avoid anything garish. Each was unique to itself, not to a series. Well, I never thought of it, this is one of the plays for today, or it's one of the plays of the month. It was our show as it happened, and absolutely unique, and no other existed. Some of it was kitchen sink, some of it wasn't. And you know, a play like John Galsworthy's Strife could be thought of as an industrial, about an industrial strike, could be thought to be kitchen sink. Secrets was one of a series of farces which they did, and this was written by some of the Pythons. I was a bit leery of the Pythons. In fact, I was rather frightened of them because they tended to want to interfere a lot and wanted to sit in the editing, and I said, there is no way I'm letting you get anywhere near the editing. But we sort of made quite a nice film, I think. It was very strange and insane. Secrets was about a sweet factory, and there were three men who arrived on their bicycles at the beginning of the film into the factory, went to do their work, and they all fell into an enormous vat of chocolate. When they couldn't, it was all automatic, and the chocolate was manufactured and suddenly became immensely popular because of all the bodies. It was a slightly crazy film with Warren Mitchell and a lot of other people, and sadly it seemed to disappear. Now, Mark Chivers always worried me a little bit because he was rather quiet and never said much. But he's a good producer, and he's now sadly no longer with us. He seemed to like that film and took his own home recording of it, and eventually it came to light and he said, well, I happen to have this. Do you think it could be republished? Do you think it could be republished? And it was. Multicamera was the way almost everything was shot in drama a few years ago. It wasn't, curiously, a bad way of doing things. You could get an immense amount of stuff shot in a very short time, but there was a great deal of snobbery. People said that's just mere tape. Film is the thing. And they weren't actually talking about 35mm film, they were talking about rather poor quality 16mm. But I loved shooting film, and it was just a different way of approaching it. What in fact it meant was that we do far less drama, far less interesting drama now, because it's all shot in rates rather too fast and under-rehearsed and shot on film. And it's a pity we've lost multicamera. It used to work quite well. The trouble with the BBC is it's now become a publisher rather than a producer. And there's so many people wanting to say what will sell and what won't, and what is good and what is bad. And in fact, to do an original play is always a slight risk. And you need people who are keen to take risks, and you don't get so many of them anymore. Oh, it was exciting because each studio went into a sort of reception area with a canteen, and casts would mix with one another and talk to one another and go in and look at each other's productions. I was always very keen. Anyone who wanted to come and see what I was doing could come in, and they could stand behind me if they liked in the gallery. And so long as there weren't too many of them. But there was a great deal of coming and going, and minor casting was done at great speeds during a tea break very often. Television Centre was an extraordinary building. It was based on the whole multi-camera technique, and when that became less, people said, what's the point of it all? And eventually, as you know, it's almost disappeared. It's been sold, and now I believe being hired back by the BBC. The whole idea of the circular building, with scenery being rattled round, a corridor on the outside, and a show finishing at 10 o'clock at night, and from 10 o'clock a whole new set would come in and be set up by 8 o'clock in the morning, ready to be shot at 10 o'clock, was an amazing, and they couldn't do that now. I don't think they'd want to, but they couldn't. And of course there's far less set building going on. They were all right at the BBC. They weren't all right at Thames, for example. At Thames, where I did a really quite a successful show called Jenny Lady Randolph Churchill, which won a lot of prizes. The unions had you just like that, and suddenly they would say, we want extra money for soft shoes, or we want extra money for darkness, and taxis home. And Thames would say, yes, 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 anything, anything. And I remember we had the House of Commons set at Thames, and there was a make-up strike. It was 200 extras, all with beards, because it was Victorian. And when you have a make-up strike, we had to stop shooting and come back on a Sunday later at an enormous cost. And that was just the union flexing its muscles, and nothing else. Awful. I did a play from Pebble Mill called Redundant or the Wife's Revenge. I remember from live television that it was quite extraordinarily exciting. Everybody became affected by the fact that it was live, and there was an electric feeling about the whole place. Right down to the guy who swept the studio. They were like that. And things like makeup saying, I'm sorry, you've got a wig change there, that'll take 20 minutes. I said, what you've got is two scenes, one of 1 minute 30 and one of 2 minutes. That's how much you've got. Go. And of course they did it. It wasn't that good a play, I'm afraid. Although we had one or two unfortunate things happening. The lighting man leant on a bank of switches and all the lights went out. And Leslie Phillips, who was in the middle of a speech, just went up an octave and carried on speaking and then came down again. And never stopped, because they were... but we still found it rather exciting. The thing I'd like to see again, if it exists, is the first piece of film I shot for Lorna Doone on Exmoor in 1962. Probably for sentimental reasons, because I enjoyed it so much. Other than that, there's an enemy of the state, and that's about it, I think.